Okay, you about ready, Diane? Let's call to order the Contra Costa Transportation Authority Planning Committee meeting for February 4th. The gang's all here except Member Durant. He'll be here shortly. Public comment is open. Those in the audience are encouraged to address us on any item not on the agenda. Do we have any cards? Seeing none. Do I see anybody rushing to a mic? Seeing none. Public comments closed. Consent calendar items. Whoops, let's do the minutes first. Any?
Move approval. Second.
Motion Abelson, second Meechoff. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Isn't that wonderful? Consent calendar items generally routine in nature, act upon a single item. Okay, we got Meechoff first, Romick second. Any cards anybody want to speak? Anybody want to pull to mess us up?
Sorry, on the consent calendar, there is on your dais, you'll see there's.
Oh, that's part of it. You saw the handouts part of it.
Yes.
You need us to do anything?
No.
Unless it's alternative action? I thought so. These people are smart. They don't mess around with that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Seeing no opposition, that's 4-0. One on the way. Item 5, authorization, the execution of cooperative agreement 22W.01. Mr. Engel.
Yes, good evening, Chair Hudson and Commissioners. This is an exciting item. It will be the first ferry service serving Contra Costa County to
All of
San
our
Francisco.
items are exciting. What do you mean?
This is just another exciting item. Not the first. Well, the first in a while, yes. So what's before you tonight is an item that we're hoping you will approve to go to the authority. It is basically a funding agreement for operating the ferry service from Richmond to San Francisco. It would be 3 a.m. peak hour runs and 4 a.m. runs, 4 p.m. peak hour runs from San Francisco back to Richmond. What we're proposing to do would be to, at the time the service starts, bring you an annual, like we do with all of our programs, buses, paratransit, bring you an annual funding resolution. What would make this one a little bit different is it would include some operating information, budget, what performance we expect to see during the year, how we're going to verify the expenditures, because what we're proposing to do is pay the actual expenditures of the Richmond-only service, with a reasonable prorated share of the admin cost for the WIDA program. So we would bring that to you on an annual basis. The reason we're bringing this to you now, when the service is probably not going to start until 2018, is because WIDA wants some assurance that we are able to fund the program for a 10-year period so they can go ahead and make the capital expenditures, purchase the vessels, work on the terminal in Richmond, and so on. We've got folks here from WIDA if you have any questions. We've got John Nemeth from WCTAC. WCTAC approved this item at their last board meeting and asked us to take action on this. We will actually, the attachment in here is the terms of the service. Since this item was posted, we've been working on the actual agreement with our legal counsel, so we will be obviously bring that item to the board authority.
Any questions of staff before WCTAC moves this? I think it's pretty cut and dry. I mean, if you guys want it and it's your dollars.
I'm very happy to move approval of this item if there are no comments from the
Okay.
public.
Motion Abelson, second Durant. All those in favor say aye. Let's get this WIDA people out of here. Thank you very much for coming. Yep, you got to be quick in this one. We don't mess around. Okay, item 6, approval of agreement with DKS. We've seen it before. We'll hear it again. Who's doing a staff report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning. And you have seen this before. And just to recap, we did a lot of public outreach during our countywide transportation plan draft review. And we heard fairly resoundingly from the public, from members of the public, that they're very concerned about congestion on the I-680 corridor, and they would like to see some transit options on that corridor. So back in December, we gave you two choices, whether to do a $250,000 study or $1 million study, and the authority worked on that through December and decided on doing the smaller study for $250,000. We do want to fast track this study. it's a very urgent need that we find out what are the options on I-680, because in the next year we're going to be possibly developing an expenditure plan for a Measure J renewal. And so to expedite the study, we're proposing to do a non-competitive procurement process and to use local funding. We would use the Measure J regional planning funds called Organizational Unit OCP 18B. The scope of work is in your packet, and that scope has been reviewed by the TransPAC TAC, that's a Central County RTPC TAC. It's been reviewed by the TVTC TAC and also by the SWAT Policy Committee, Southwest. So I think that everybody is in concurrence with the overall scope. We are still working on a few things, and I want to point those out to you. So first of all, looking at the scope of work, the selected consultant would be DKS Associates, and I see Terry Klim in the audience representing DKS if you have any questions for him. Bill Loudon is the project manager, and he is out tonight but unable to attend. The scope of work would go back and look at all of the previous studies that have been done, and there have been a lot of them as listed in your packet. And there's also a public engagement section here, and I just had a conversation with Ivy Morrison of Circle Point. Circle Point would be the subconsultant for the public engagement, and we want to revisit this public outreach to make sure that it fits in with everything else that's going on in the corridor. We have the direct access ramps, we have the southbound HOV connection from North Main down to Livorno, and we want to coordinate this outreach with those events. So the task 2, getting stakeholder input from residents, we're going to modify that, and we'll bring back a revision at the authority meeting. It'll be very similar to what you have, but the exact mechanics and timing of it may change slightly after we coordinate with the projects people a little more on what's happening there. And I also want to underscore that we are looking at I-680 congestion relief, which means ramp metering, which means HOV lanes, hot lanes. Mm-hmm. We have a very good resource there. Matt Kelly, our associate transportation planner, has been working with Caltrans on the what's called the CSMP, the Corridor System Management Plan for I-680. And they've got a new computer model for looking at ramp metering out to 2040. And they've done all this work and analysis, and it's very fresh and it's very new. So we're going to lean on that study to look at the congestion relief options there. We're going to pick from that study quite a bit. We don't have the budget or scope to entirely redo that work, and we don't plan to redo it. The other question is the data collection, and we've gotten some quotes on getting origin destination information from a company called AirSage, which uses Bluetooth technology to give us origin destination. The bids on that are coming in a little bit high for a $250,000 study. We're trying to get a government rate, but we also have a lot of
That
other...
is the government rate.
we also have a lot of other data that we can use from the MTC household surveys from the 2010 census, and we have, of course, a travel demand forecasting model that can tell us within pretty close accuracy where people are coming from and going to, and of course that's a very important part of the study, is understanding where the trips are going. The schedule, we hope to have this thing underway in early March. It says mid-February, but probably by the time we get underway, it'll be early March. And we want to have some results within 6 months. So it's a very quick schedule, very rapid fire. Oversight of this will be through a technical advisory committee and a policy advisory committee, and that's at the request of the members of SWAT. They specifically wanted that. I have seen in the past where it can take 6 months actually to appoint a policy advisory committee, so we're going to do that through the regional committees. We'll ask the regional committees to assign their elected official from each city to the corridor. And then I think the technical advisory committees could also be those same people, the planners and engineers that are on the RTPC. So it'd be the Tri-Valley group. It would be the which includes the southern part of SWAT, and then it would be the Central County Transpac group, and they would create the policy and technical advisory committees, and we'd meet as need be to hear from DKS about the results. Since this is a non-competitive consultant selection process, we've filled out what's called a public interest finding, and that's attachment B of your packet, which states the reasons why it would be infeasible and inefficient at this point to go through a full procurement process, where we would also follow, we'd be following the federal guidelines, and that can take 6 weeks to 3 months, depending on, how things go. So we want to get this going right away with non-competitive procurement. That's my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions of staff before Member Durant's motion? No, it's your turn. And I'll tell you why. You're going to hear the same thing from me every time. Walnut Creek, Dublin is fine, but Dublin is the Dublin Pleasanton, and we should start really thinking into Pleasant Hill. And I believe that SWAT picked Karen Stepper and myself. I don't know, I just assumed Candace for our corridor SWAT people, and I don't know what Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill would do, but I would encourage someone within listening distance to be part of it, if not two.
Candace is representing the South as a supervisor, and then I'll be on.
Cool. That's cool by me. I mean, Walnut Creek, throw them in there. More the merrier, and whatever Karen says, I'll do. Okay. Okay, that's Candace. All right. Oh, no. Okay, that was a motion, Durant, a second, Mitchoff. No further questions. All those in favor say aye. Number 7, Martin, you're up again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Martin Engelman again, and we want to talk about the CTP vision, goals, and strategies. The final countywide transportation plan is, we're heading down the home stretch after big outreach effort last fall, and this is going to go out to the public as a draft final probably mid next week. You'll see it on the streets, and it will be available in the Technical Coordinating Committee packet for February 19th. And then from there, it goes to the Planning Committee on March 4th. And from there, we go to adoption of the final plan on March 18th. The plan is centered upon the vision, goals, and strategies. That's what drives the whole thing. And since we got a lot of comments from a lot of interested parties on those strategies, especially, we're making modifications to them. And rather than bring the whole thing to you all at once with the rest of the plan in March, we thought we'd parse this out and give it to you so you could look at them kind of stand alone at this point and make sure that you're okay with the changes that staff is proposing in response to comments received. I also want to point out a letter that did not get into the original packet of 33 letters. We have a letter from Save Mount Diablo, and it's on both the CTP and the draft EIR, and unfortunately it went into the draft EIR pile of letters, so we always had it at hand, but it didn't go into the public handout that we had when we showed the 33 letters. So it's actually 34 now, and this is a very interesting letter in that Save Mount Diablo is voicing their objection to the James Donlin Boulevard extension, and they have some concerns about State Route 239 Tri-Link, and they also had some questions about a number of projects, one on Willow Road and certain other projects. So we're certainly going to respond to the concerns in our response to comments, but I wanted to point that letter out to you. And so unless you have any questions about those process issues, I'm going to hand it over to Brad Beck, our senior planner, and he is going to
Well, let me do
tell
this
you about
first.
the changes to the
If I
to
can,
the
Martin, just-
vision, goals, and strategies.
Anybody have questions for Martin, or you want to hear the whole thing? Good, go Brad.
Thank you. We, as Martin said, got a lot of comments. Many of them were on the vision, goals, and strategies. So we listened to them, looked at them, and proposed a number of changes to them. Not to the 4 goals; those would stay the same with these changes. First, in the section called "Finding the Right Balance," you'll note that the first bullet mentioned improving the regional system of roads, transit, and pathways. And a number of people said we should expand that list. So we're proposing to put in truck routes, ferries, and bicycle routes. And it's something that a number of commenters mentioned on a number of the strategies, that they wanted to expand a list of components of the transportation system. Or alternatively, just call it the transportation system so it would cover everything. The second change is just a change. It's an editorial change to be more grammatically correct. On the next page, we get into the strategies themselves. The first change is an example where we went the other direction, and instead of saying existing highways and arterial roads, we changed it to the transportation system. And that is focusing on increasing the efficiency of the system through capital investments, et cetera. The fourth change is to add a new strategy to find and close gaps in the countywide and regional bikeway network, and that is based on a comment from the county. The next one, we again propose changing highway and arterial to just transportation system. And that was a comment from Sierra Club and Transdev, but others have made comments similar to that. Then on the next one, the last one on that page 7.6, is we expanded it to read, and this one we changed quite a bit, identify new strategies to improve the efficiency and safety of goods movement on freeways and waterways, rail lines, and arterial roads, including local truck routes, while supporting economic development, improving air quality, and protecting local communities and neighborhoods. And there were a number of comments that we got about adding goods movement as a subject that the authority is, and we want to make it explicit that the authority is concerned with goods movement. This was something that the county, Caltrans, and Transdev all mentioned as something, as a change that we should consider. Under the second goal, managing growth, on the third bullet, we're suggesting changing the wording to strike regional and say cooperative land use and transportation planning, emphasizing the link between the two, and then to add the phrase to help achieve regional, state, and federal objectives.
I'm going to be the secretary grammar person here. State should not be capitalized.
See, that'll teach you. That'll teach you. Try and slip one through. They give you these easy ones, Karen, so they think you won't notice.
Because it's
the
an
tough
adjective.
ones that are-
Because it's an adjective
No, because it's state, federal.
or a modifier.
Whereas when I'm saying
It's any
state
state,
of
yeah.
California, you're just saying state, so you don't have to capitalize.
Well, I've always said that it stands for the state of California, so.
Well, okay, it's not a big deal. It just looks silly to have a little R.
It does look odd, I admit
I wouldn't
that.
cross her.
For what it's worth, I
Keep
think
going.
Karen's right.
Keep going, Brad.
Okay.
She is, they'll change it.
Down on the fifth bullet, require local jurisdictions. There are two additions. One is to add, to require local jurisdictions to track development, and also add transit options under the third phrase, identify necessary capital improvements, operational improvements, and transit options. Both the BIA and the county are suggesting that the jurisdiction's track development. It's something that they do, and it's something that we would like to keep track of what's going on in the county so that we can better integrate and understand the transportation needs for that new development. On the next one, linked transportation investments 2, these are, the first one is instead of which enhance to that support, and then add the phrase and increase transit use. And these are sort of a restatement of some of the requirements in the growth management program. In the next one, we struck the phrase within Contra Costa and the region, just to make it a little more straightforward, and then added the phrase support economic development, because those are the three, it's one of the three parts of the vision that the authority is working to support a strong economy, a good quality of life, and the environment. And then we added a new strategy, work with state, regional, and local agencies to develop cost-effective programs and approaches to mitigate the impacts of growth and conserve resources.
And of course, you'll do a search and replace on that one.
Yes,
Don't
we
mess
can
with
do
it.
that. And that was as,
Consistent throughout the documents.
we would definitely be consistent. And that was something that the county, and as well as with the one on the next page, which is a newly added strategy, incorporate measures into the authority's policies and procedures to help minimize or eliminate the impacts of greenhouse gas emissions. Those two strategies were suggested by a number of the commenters, the county, Caltrans, Sierra Club, Save Mount Diablo, Transdef, and Greenbelt Alliance. On the third goal, expand alternatives to the single occupant vehicle. BART suggested on the first strategy that we mentioned the BART station access programs. And we also wanted to add in ride-sharing services. We've got comments about those being a good strategy to add. We changed link to support. We got comments from a couple of the transit agencies as well as Contra Costa Health Services and Monument Crisis Center on that strategy. Added goods movement on the next one. Both county and Caltrans supported that change. Further down the page, support the expansion of a coordinated system of affordable transit. We got comments from Monument Crisis Center, Contra Costa Health Services, and the county and Transform all on that change. On the next page, page 7-9 in your packet, the first one, first change is an editorial one, rather trying not to be as redundant, just say congestion and parking pricing programs. And then we had suggestions that we add the term mobile apps, but we thought, well, we add mobile apps, why don't we add some of the other technological innovations that what we're considering. So we put in, and other agencies are implementing, such as universal transit payment, ride-sharing apps, and real-time transit routing and arrival information. On the fourth goal, maintaining the system, the first change is just to move one of the strategies in order. There's no change in the language. And then on the next one, we changed to focus on both a stable source of funds for transit operations and maintenance programs. That support the transportation system seemed redundant, so we're proposing to strike it. We suggest changing required to support, since that would be the role of the authority is to support that, and we don't have any requirements yet for that. And then there's a new one, facilitate meeting new requirements such as complete streets and stormwater quality management, which may affect maintenance and rehabilitation projects. That was based on a comment from the county. The final goal is the new goal, continue to invest wisely. And on that one, we propose one change, and that is to add the word potential in the first one. So it would read, use performance measures to evaluate and compare potential transportation investments. And with that, those are the changes that we're proposing to the vision goals and strategies.
Okay, we'll go questions to staff, starting from the right, go back around, then we'll go 1 through 5. Dave, you got any, I know there's got to be something wrong in there.
I only have 10 or 12 questions.
Okay.
All right, so, thanks and sorry. The first question I have is on page 7-7. And I'm trying to understand what we are intending with the proposed change to add the phrase protecting local communities and neighborhoods, particularly given the juxtaposition between that phraseology and the subject heading of the next section, which is about preserving the environment and supporting communities. So we've got protecting local communities and neighborhoods versus supporting communities, and I'm trying to understand what those two things mean.
Sounds a little like Bach and Crude to me, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, and just so you understand my setup for this is, if they mean the same thing, let's use the same words. If they intend to be something different, let's be clear about what that difference is. But to me, that protecting local communities and neighborhoods feels a little bit different than supporting its communities, and to me opens the door to some challenges to local control on some things. So I want to just get it aired out.
Who proposed it? Because I see what you're saying, but it's got that qualifier of while, so you're right. It's in there to support, but protect communities. So do you remember who proposed the language? Or does it even?
Yeah, because it's sort of like protect them from what and
Well, they
from
don't want heavy trucks
Yeah,
coming
the
down
goods
their
movement.
neighborhood streets.
Well, but see, I'm not sure that's what it is. That's why I'm asking.
Well,
That's,
the strategy is about goods movement.
yep.
It's that we identify new strategies to improve the efficiency and safety of goods movement. And then we list the parts of the transportation that we're looking at. But we recognize that there are those issues with air quality and protecting local communities. We've heard on more than one occasion about issues of trains blocking neighborhoods, or the diesel particulate matter that is produced near freight yards, and trucks going through neighborhoods. So we thought it would be good to, on the one hand, say that we're looking for these ways of improving efficiency and safety of goods movement. We also want to recognize that we wanted to improve air quality and protect local communities at the same time.
Oh, yeah. I hit the wrong button. Go ahead. You have to turn back on.
Sorry.
Well, give it some thought. It's
Yeah,
coming
no,
to the
it's-
next meeting.
Well, yeah, okay. It's how do I say this? The challenge for me is the word choice in the sentence structure as it exists. Because, for example, Karen was reading it as protecting local communities, modifying, including local truck routes, and I don't read it that way.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead,
Could
Martin.
I make a
Chime in.
suggestion? So Commissioner Durant, I think maybe if we envision the Byron Community Outreach Workshop that we had, and we heard that, when the trucks go down the street, the house shakes.
Yes.
The gas shuts
And
off.
so we're trying to figure out ways to either get the trucks onto another through route or away from the local neighborhoods. And so maybe protecting is not the right words, but we're trying to figure out a way to help the community.
That's what I was hoping you'd say.
Mitigate this. So I don't know what the right word is. But
Mitigate is the word choice that I would be
Okay,
looking
so
for.
mitigate.
Because it's, yeah.
Would it
Yeah.
be mitigating impacts on?
Yeah, that to me would be a more clear articulation of what it is I think we're trying to get to.
On or to, Dave? Mitigating impacts on or to protect?
Yeah, I like
Okay,
that.
because he said on, I don't know
Yeah,
if you caught that.
on or to.
Huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that's good. That was my
That's number
first.
one. Keep
That's
going.
number one. Okay, number two, I'm not clear on the rationale for eliminating regional from the cooperative land use in the third bullet, number two, same page. That's probably the easiest way to say it. Are we attempting to expand the notion of cooperation or limit the notion of cooperation by removing that word?
I think it's the doubling of the two, regional,
I thought it was expanding because you.
because
don't wanna
regional's in the
say
last one.
Within and outside of Contra Costa.
Yeah, because it says regional, state, and federal objectives, but
Well, yeah. So
Yeah, that was the idea that if you say regional, and then you also say within and outside Contra Costa, you're being redundant.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. All right, good. Next one, tracking development. It's two paragraphs down. Yeah. So you said in your presentation that we already do this, the county does it, the cities do it. What does it actually mean? Like, we're not going to be like, I don't know, what does it mean in this context? Because, again, I'm hesitant to have us impose new obligations on local jurisdictions or to tie funding to local jurisdictions adopting new methods of whatever we mean by tracking.
Well, one of the issues that we've heard, and I heard it today at the Regional Planning Committee, is that there is a need to understand what's going on in our region and in our county in terms of development, where it's happening, how much development is occurring. What was the statistic that we heard today, that there are 144,000 jobs and 7,000 new housing units in the last few years. So we're not doing what we need to do to provide the housing to meet the job growth that we're having. Of course, a lot of that job growth is catch-up, so it's made the difference between the two numbers may not be quite as severe as it sounds. Jurisdictions, to get that information, we're going to have to get the information from the jurisdictions. They're the ones who permit the development and know intimately about what's going on. So the idea.
Aren't they already doing that, Brad?
Well, they are doing it. This is a requirement that's something that they're already doing. So we're not thinking that it's a significant new burden, would be a new burden on them.
whatever, don't turn it on.
In a lot of ways, it would be more of a burden on us to keep track of, pull that information together. It's something we've been doing as part of the PDA strategy, trying to keep track of what's going on.
To facilitate, Dave, does it make more sense to you if we just take out tract development? Because if you read it without it, I think it's saying the
It
same.
stays the same, yeah.
Yeah.
And this may be coming from BIA and
It-
their lawsuit.
We do it anyway, so it doesn't matter. I mean, we
Yeah,
have to
you
do it by
to
legal
do it
settlement.
anyway. The rest of it is more important. I guess maybe whoever made the comment thought that you can't do the rest without doing the tracking, but if you're already doing the tracking,
He's got a lot more, that's why I said that,
I
Kevin.
understand.
Yeah, yeah,
I've
no-
seen Dave before. He's not stopping at 3.
Yeah.
He's not stopping.
No, I'm sort of simple this way. My brain works in complicated ways. I don't know what we mean by track. And I don't mean if it really
Yeah.
does mean what all of our communities are doing today, and they're all doing the same thing, and so we're not imposing any additional burden on them. But I see a phrase like that, track development, and I start thinking, 72-column spreadsheets and us having to hire new people in order to track development, whatever that means, to meet whosever objective it is that we're trying to meet by tracking, whatever tracking means. That's all I'm trying to do is understand.
Yeah. Are we doing it already in the growth management element? I mean, Brad?
Yeah.
We are getting some of that information. We're not asking for that. We're asking for some information as part of the housing
Let me-
housing options
Let Randy
component
chime
of
in,
the
too,
checklist.
afterwards.
It's like this.
It's
So
simpler.
So part of the return to source process is report to us what you've done with the money on a yearly basis. We have a heck of a time getting the information. Do you have all the information? It's reporting. We want
Right.
reports on what the impacts of development are so that we can do our analysis for PDAs and things like that. So
I'm
that's really
happy
what-
as heck with that sentence, right?
Could we change the
yeah.
track development and say, evaluate and report on development and their impacts on land use decisions?
Yes.
Yeah, I would prefer that also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rather than track. Happy to go.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going, Dave. We're going to get all yours out first.
Okay.
Then Karen, then Kevin. We're going to roll right on. Okay.
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 Well, we count you as 1A, 1B.
Thank you for that, by the way. Next bullet is the linking of transportation investments. It's sort of the same nature of concern with the phrase track development as increased transit use, which suggests to me that we're essentially going to require in every transportation investment that we make that any new development, regardless of size or scope, is going to be geared toward enhancing transit use. And so one of the things that I absolutely get is the idea that we want to funnel money to PDAs. We want to evaluate for developments as they come forward, and we want to facilitate where it's reasonable, rational, and sensible, spending money on things that are facilitative of transit use. But I don't ever want that, it's my own personal view, to be sort of the criteria for any and all transportation investments that we make, that they must, each and every one of them, increase transit usage, or each project, in order to get funding, has to have a component of increasing transit usage. Because, depending on size and scope, again, I just don't think that's a right, rational, exclusive focus. So I hesitate simply because of where that phrase is in this paragraph.
I read it a little differently.
Go ahead.
What we're saying is we want
We'll
to
get to you, Janet.
link transportation investments to new developments that support, because I get what you're saying, that support and increase transit. It's not requiring increased, that we just want to link it. I guess it's when you have the check sheet, if you've got two projects, all things being equal, and one increases transit use and one doesn't, the one that increases transit use is more likely to get the grant funding or whatever. That's how I read it. I don't read it that it is requiring that each new development have increased transit use. It's just that it's like, when you go to apply for a job, if you've been a veteran, you get extra brownie points. That's how I look at it, but you may not look at it that way. So.
Yeah, and again, this may just sort of be a defect of mine for me, but I look at the words that are here. So we got new development that supports transportation efficiency, economic vitality, and increased transit use. And my brain automatically goes to, okay, we went from two things that seem sensible and rationally related to adding a third that to me seems like a subset of the first two. And so adding it must mean that it's not part of the first two, or that it's trying to do something different. Otherwise, I don't get why we make the change. Because to me, exactly what you said, Karen, is right, though. If you're doing this in a way that is enhancing transportation efficiency and economic vitality, you're definitionally working to get people out of single-occupant vehicles and into transit, but that's not your exclusive focus when you're interpreting or defining transportation efficiency and economic vitality.
I would say sometime between now and the authority when, Kevin doesn't do it anymore. Take another look at it. Dave, you've got it better. I mean, when you take it back and put it in.
Leaving it out
Yeah.
as the first
No, I'm
two.
saying
Yeah,
leave it in
I would-
until you.
yeah.
Until you.
Yeah, and my suggestion on this one is I would simply leave that one the way it was, because I think it's inherent in the notion that existed before, that if you've got a project that's going to increase transit use, that definitionally is making the transportation system more efficient, and I think we all agree that that's sort of also consistent with the notion of supporting or enhancing economic vitality. But
Why is 680 to another language that enhances economic vitality and makes your transportation system more efficient, but it doesn't necessarily.
correct, it's not necessarily that, but the opposite is also true, right? Everything that enhances transit is also not, if you will, supportive of transportation efficiency.
we have an exception on State Route 4, because we can widen, on State Route 4, because we can widen it to 6 lanes without an HOV, and then ultimately 8 lanes with the HOV.
Let me do this, because I know you're going to have other stuff, too.
No, I think
This one?
actually this may be the last one for me, but
Let me do it this way and see if you answered. It might help in forming it. Get down to word number 2, just II. New development that support transportation efficiency, economic vitality, which might include, or which would include, or which could include increased transit use. Are you looking for something like that? It isn't definitive or words along that line? That I'm saying, don't let me be the one that picks up the words, or you're really going to. But sometime between now and, sometime between now and the real deal, that we clean this one up. Bracket it, take a look at it, and that's the one that's caught our attention. If you can come up with something before we leave, because I figure if we get you away from this setting, and you really look at it, you'll come up with something with Brad, and that would come this. I mean, it's not that you haven't done this before, right? Go ahead, Karen.
Maybe it's an
Or Randy.
incentive. Maybe it's an incentive. So what you do is you try to build something that allows for more and easier use of transit. Doesn't necessarily, as you say, it's not going to increase transit per se. It may not. But it's certainly going to incentivize the use of more transit up and down, whatever that efficiency is that you do to your transit.
Let me stay with it again. I've read the
gonna-
tea leaves. When he gives you a look like that, it ain't perfect yet. So I'm just saying, I mean, you've chaired this thing. Set aside, take a look at that particular one, David, because something better is going to happen. Rather than try and do it in 5 minutes tonight, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I'm-
Something bothered you, and then we'll get another look at it. It's not like it's not passed.
Yeah.
And it might be that when we get to Janet, she doesn't like it.
Mr.
either.
Chairman?
Go ahead.
How about if we just took out the increase and said, because we want to put the transit in there because,
You want it in there.
well, we got a
Yeah.
comment from Save Dam, Mount Diablo, Transdev, Sierra Club, Greenbelt Alliance, the county, and Transform on this. And
Sustainable communities.
And so take out the increase and say, we could say encourages.
Just transit use. See, you see, I've seen
I'm
that
gonna-
look before.
yeah.
If you give him 5 minutes after we get away from the setting, he does this for a living. He's going to come up with the exact words. That's what I'm saying. But when you get him right here where, we got to do it and vote on something between, and we don't on this particular one. We're not that far off. And it's the kind of thing that something's got to come up. There's got to be transit in it, or you're going to have people at the, I keep saying
Oh, yeah,
your chair, but
and so we're
Yeah.
clear. As I said, I'm fully supportive of the idea that we want to be investing primarily in things that do these things and that facilitate increased use of transit and so on. But this language reads as exclusive, not primary. That's part of the challenge for me. And I mentioned this to Peter and who we were sitting with at lunch today, that one of the biggest challenges I find in the way we do the transportation system in this area of the world, meaning Contra Costa and Alameda County, is we do great on lots of things, but not on getting people to the public transit that we have already in place. And so for somebody like me who commutes from Pleasant Hill to Pleasanton every day, it's a really great.
it's got a rhyme.
Right?
Pleasant to the Pleasant Hill.
Yeah.
That's going to be my comment.
Yeah.
So keep going.
Right? That the system's not particularly efficient today, and we're hoping 680 we can figure out some things around that. But if I can't get me from my house to the Pleasant Hill BART station and from the Dublin BART station to my office, then I don't really care what you do with the rest of the system in between, right? Just as a commuter, an individual commuter. Same thing with today, getting out to Sacramento, right? The notion that Janet had to leave early from something because there was a bus that only runs with 1 hour headways instead of 15-minute headways. But I don't, again, my concern with this language is that the linking transportation investments, the way this is written, it simply says every single transportation investment we're going to make is going to be linked to each of these things. And new developments that support transportation efficiency, economic vitality, and increased transit use sounds like it's exclusive, meaning if it doesn't fit that criteria, it's not going to get transportation investments. And that just feels limiting and not wise to me.
I'm going to stay with the same
So,
suggestion.
Anyway, so I'm happy to
Yeah.
talk about it offline.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be sort of clear conceptually that,
How many times do you walk away from oh, there it is.
Yeah.
That's all.
yeah.
All right. Anything else, Dave?
Karen?
Karen?
That's it.
Kevin?
Mine was with the tracking and the rest of
You got it? Janet's going to solve everything now. Go for it.
Well, it just, in terms of the example that you used with me, I actually did find a solution once I got to the Amtrak station in, which I won't detail right now. However, I would say that the problem there is that there could be more, the information system is probably not as robust as it could be in that particular case, and this doesn't actually probably address that at all. So, don't know where that leads us, but the,
That'd be under 3, what you're talking about.
we were, yeah, that's where we were, but I'm not sure that the answer is. I just wanted to point out that I, in fact, did find a solution. So, likewise, though, there's another thing I'm thinking about, and that is that in my area, we're complaining because people can't get where they want to go because there isn't enough transit. On San Pablo Avenue, which is the western Contra Costa County main drag, there aren't enough seats on the bus for people to get where they want to go. And so the conversation we're having is rather remote to me because we're having kind of a different problem. And so this is supposed to cover all of that, I believe, right? And so it's not, I guess would be my comment. I understand your situation, what you're saying, but that isn't a universal situation. I'm wondering how the situation I'm thinking of escaped getting in here, because at the public hearings that I went to, it was verbalized.
I think that's meant in 3, the 1, 2, 3, 4.
On page 7, 8?
7, 8, bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet. It talks about in greater use of transit, which to me says improving capacity or increasing capacity.
Well, it's
Except that it doesn't say that.
It's in the first bullet, the second bullet, the sixth bullet, the fourth bullet.
Yeah, the first bullet is the most.
Yeah. Janet, while you're reading,
Okay.
this is the one I think we're talking about. Promote the formation of more carpools and vanpools and greater use of transit, biking, and walking.
But the first one says right up
Mm-hmm.
front, help fund the expansion of existing transit
Yeah.
services. And regional, well, forget regional.
Bus transit,
But
paratransit, and
it doesn't
ride-sharing
actually
services.
mention, and maybe that would be a thing that would make me a little bit happier, to fund the lack of adequate service now provided in some areas.
expansion of existing train services.
But I'm wanting to explain why.
Okay.
It isn't just because we think that transit is the most wonderful thing in the world. It's that there are a lot of people out there who are wanting to use it, and there isn't enough of it in some areas.
See, I read
I'm wanting
this
to get
actually.
that point across because,
Yeah.
and in fact, AC Transit's even actually the moment doing something about it because they heard what was said at those hearings and they're adding some service. So we're kind of anyway, we could emphasize that a bit more, I think.
Well, maybe that goes back to I just don't think of it, these are proactive verb kind of things, and I just don't see here saying, because there's a lack of adequate, help fund the expansion of. And, to me, maybe it needs to be stated somewhere else, but I don't know what's in the bullet points. Again, Randy and Martin are putting their heads together over there.
Well, I don't see any lights on, so let's make it as the comments Janet has on this thing and see if there's something else. I mean, because I think it kind of caught us. I thought, of all the things that I thought we caught, I mean, we kind of touched on that, but we're missing something. So I'd say the same thing with you, Janet. Grab them and beat them up in a corner and get the right wording in there. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, under goals, again, these are proactive, but it's, to me, we want to, I know what you're saying, Janet, beyond just expanding, you want something in here that says there's not enough of. And so,
We
the
need to,
reason we're expanding is twofold, to get people to move into it and to increase capacity.
right, but getting people to move into it is not what I was talking about.
I know it is.
So I think we need to, because the situation that Dave was
Yeah,
talking
yeah, I
about
think I
was
know.
kind of different, and I think that sometimes is the way people look at transit. They think it's there and it's empty and nobody rides it or
Right.
whatever, but in some places, that actually is not what's happening, and people are,
Finding
So,
the right balance.
That's what I say, if you add a bullet to the finding the right balance section,
where is that?
on page 7-5, if you took the concept, Janet, that you're talking about, which is,
It's actually
to-
the third bullet, is that, recognizing the differing needs, just, and the lack of capacity,
well, it's the third bullet or the fifth bullet,
yeah.
right? Because it's different than the fifth bullet, which is the supporting and encouraging the use of transit. What Janet's saying is that you don't need to do that part in along San Pablo because you've already got people who want transit. There's not enough transit there for them to utilize.
Right.
So what you're really talking about is something that, it seems to me anyway, is part of what we were saying that we think the first bullet in 3 covers, which is expanding the existing transit services in a host of ways to accommodate the existing ridership where applicable, right, or something like that.
And I think you'll probably find the wording in the corridor planning from
Yeah.
One Bay area. It'll be something similar
But
to what you're looking for.
Would that concept,
It helps.
without the words? Yeah.
I just, it helps, but what concerns me is the thing of what appears to me to be going after the transit, which is what you were in some ways doing, saying.
No.
Well, it wasn't a thing that supported the conversations that I heard when I went to public hearings in West County, where people were, they were desperate, unable to get to work, unable to function because there weren't enough seats on the bus.
Right. So
And
I'm not understanding,
so-
Janet.
Brad,
Oh.
we got a new light. Let's see if he can chime in. So,
thank you. I'm having a hard time talking.
well, I'm going to make
at
the
all. I
same
have-
suggestion to
having
you
an
that I did to him.
asthma problem, but
Go ahead, Brad.
You're getting emotional.
No,
Oh.
she's cool. Go ahead.
On the
She needs another
second,
bottle.
on the second bullet under expand alternatives, it says support, on page 7-8, says support transit investments that lead to increased coordination and integration of public transit services, and we could add increased transit frequencies, which I think is, that's the problem that you've identified, is that the buses or trains are not coming as frequently as the people need them to come.
or the buses aren't as, the capacity is, you're right, it is a capacity issue. The buses come very frequently. They come every 12, one comes every 12 minutes, one's every 15. They overlap, and there aren't enough seats. So I'm talking about kind of the exact opposite.
Well, how about in that,
Wait, I'm going to make a suggestion that's going to help everybody right now. David has an issue, and we were working where the bullet goes and how to work on that. I swear this happens to all of us. We're going to walk away from this table and come up with the answer. You've got one that is identified that can be added on 3, the second bullet.
David,
And
I'm
go
s-
ahead.
On the second bullet, under number 3, what about support transit investments that lead to increased capacity, comma, coordination and integration, blah, blah, blah.
Or if you come up with something 20 minutes from
Well,
now,
it's
that too.
one word
Yeah.
that's adds and addresses the issue of capacity that Janet is talking about.
And I would be most happy if we would add the words where appropriate as part of that. So that means we don't have to do it everywhere. I'm not,
Okay.
But it already talks about,
no, I mean, we don't need to do it throughout our service.
no, I know the document already
county.
addresses that issue. There's competing needs, but whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, we got direction on that one. We can get to my comments. I've got about 18, no. But I think we're at the end of this thing, and you can take it from there. You're not going to need any more than what we just brought, or do you need some form of motion with exact wording? Okay. The ones that I do have, page 7.2, number 2, manage growth to sustain Contra Costa economy. In the first bullet, many commenters expressed an interest in updating the strategies to achieve the objectives of SB 375, I would add, and greenhouse gas reductions. The second bullet, we've added 2 strategies to acknowledge our desire to work with our partners to address greenhouse. I mean, we can let it go at that, but I would change it to address climate change instead of the GHGs.
And I
'Cause there's
see
a
another
lot more in
state there, by the way. I'm sorry, I missed that earlier.
Yeah.
But, I mean, and if you do, you do, you don't, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. The third bullet I was looking at the end of the sentence, and to help support our planning activities and objectives of One Bay Area. But when you look at it, this is why I say when you back away, sometimes you look at it and go, I don't know.
Where is
Because
that?
you've got it somewhere, that's on the third bullet. Okay, it's up to you. But I mean, we're part of it, and that's my suggestions, and I think what you're looking at is whether you add it or don't add it, we're all fine with it. The only thing that I think is left is if we reserve the right, if Mr. Durant thinks of something in his sleep tonight at 2 in the morning, he can call Randy. But outside of that, 3, 2, 5, anyway. You need a full motion right there. Are we good with this, pretty much with the comments? And it might be some fine, if not, we're going to find it again when we come to the full thing. But I think it's a pretty good document. It just, we hit a few things, and
So you're looking for a motion?
do you need a motion? You need a motion? Yeah, we got a motion. Motion to do this with all the little chit-chat that we, yeah. Okay, the Pleasant Hill gang has done it. Lady first, Durant second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And what a wonderful evening. Where are we? Item 8 is other business. We don't have any. News clippings and correspondence. We've got Save Mount Diablo's killed a tree. News clippings and correspondence, none. Our next meeting is March 4th at 6 o'clock. Meeting adjourned.